3, 2, 1.
And welcome into the Fantasy 4-Packs Weekend Recap Show. I'm your host, Ian Power, joined as always by Frankie Santiago. Unfortunately, Matt Vitale cannot be with us here today. We are being joined by a guest today, Mr. Mike Fontaine of TrashTalk Media. Mike, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience?
For sure. I appreciate you guys having me. Trash Talk Sports. We are another YouTube channel. We focus more on current events and what's going on in the news, and just less on the fantasy side of things, more on the current events and what people can expect to recap and things like that. So I figured that the two of us working together made a lot of sense, and I'm looking forward to it.
Sure. Glad to have you on. For any of you who are just joining us for the first time this season, the recap show is a new episode that we didn't last year as part of the waiver show, but it's essentially where we all bring to you our three takeaways from the weekend, our three and outs, if you will. Some of the biggest hurdles that we saw NFL teams either jump over or run into, and how we think that affects player or NFL teams' fantasy performances in the upcoming weeks of the fantasy season. A little bit of news to get into before we get into the three and outs, though. To the surprise of absolutely no one, although maybe about how quickly it happened, Raheem Mostert left Week 1 with a knee injury, and he has already had an MRI reportedly.
I don't want to talk about it. Can we go to the next one?
2 carries, 20 yards.
Yeah, I know.
Raheem Mostert, we hardly knew ye.
Not my 6th-round running back at all. It's fine.
Pain is all we know.
Pain is all I know.
This one's super impactful because everyone was drafting Trey Sermon, trying to figure out, when's Trey Sermon going to get the ball? Is it week 6, week 7, week 8? Like, Raheem Mostert's going to have some run at least. Turns out Raheem Mostert's run was 2 snaps.
Hey, it's actually funny that you mentioned that, because I feel like another player that we're going to talk about in the news is going to be also on my fantasy team.
Yeah, well, you are cursed.
I hate everything about.
I will say that I wanted to touch on Mostert before we jump to, because I don't think any of us are talking about Mostert as part of our three and outs today. Yeah. I did want to touch on him before we jump to the next couple guys in the news. Honestly, Trey Sermon was a healthy scratch today. It was said after the game that his lack of play, or his scratch, was due to just being outperformed by JaMychal Hasty and Elijah Mitchell in the preseason. Is this just smoke to you guys? Is Trey Sermon the unfortunate subject of Shanahanigans right now, or is he kind of dead on arrival as far as fantasy managers can be concerned?
So the way I see it is, if I was picking one back in this backfield to start the season, it was definitely going to be Mostert. But now it's kind of in that limbo where I like Trey Sermon, and despite what they've been saying, I still like him. I think that he has the potential to just eventually take on that Mostert role, depending how long Mostert's out for. But at this point, it's kind of almost like the Dolphins. We talked about last show how the Dolphins offense, we didn't really know how to, say what it was going to be, because, they had Gaskin last year perform well and they had a lot of weapons. But now I feel like it's a little bit of Shanahanigans, where
I'm so glad that Kyle.
I don't know which running back it's going to be now. So I'm just out on this backfield.
I'm so glad that Kyle is a successful coach in the NFL, so that we could keep using that after his father retired.
Yeah, I'm just I'm out on this backfield until I know where the carries are going to go. I think Sermon still has the most upside long term, but also that depends on how long Mostert's out.
Franks, I agree with that too, because Sermon, I think, is a battering ram at the running back position, and he can also catch the ball. And we saw a lot of what he can do in the preseason. And when you have Mostert go down, most people would think that he's next up, even though he was a healthy scratch. I think that this is the eye-opener that Kyle Shanahan needs to insert him in the lineup. And they always say, don't go down with an injury or whatever. Don't let somebody else take your reps, because they may never give them back.
Yeah, I mean Cam Newton can attest to that. So you guys are both firmly on the Trey Sermon train. Then, regardless of what happened on the field today, you both feel he's still the next in line for snaps potentially.
Yeah, regardless how the actual snaps turn out, I think that he should be getting the next snaps.
Okay, fair enough. Another player who unfortunately will be crushing fantasy managers' hopes and dreams this season, in large part due to a very unfortunate injury suffered by him today. Jerry Judy carted off the field with a high ankle, or what they assumed to be a high ankle sprain at this time. Last I heard, it hadn't been officially confirmed, but that's what they were expecting it to be. Timetable for that was said to be roughly 6 to 8 weeks. So if you were a Jerry Judy manager, you're not getting him back till pretty close to the fantasy playoffs. What are you doing with Judy? Like, let's say that the team doesn't put him on IR. Not every team allows for players just tagged with out to be put in an IR slot. If leagues have an IR slot, are you holding on to Judy through that injury if he isn't made IR eligible?
So with me, depending how the rest of your team looks, like if you drafted deep at wide receiver, I'm not super worried about it. But if you went say you went high tight end or high quarterback, you're probably a little bit more shallow at wide receiver because you probably also built in running backs into going those 1 or 2 positions high.
Sure.
So if I'm shallower wide receiver, I'm trying to package him with, maybe, a starter or a couple bench guys to maybe move for just a piece to replace those points somewhere else, whether it be at the wide receiver position or just get a better running back. Or honestly, I mean, depending how desperate I am, I might move like him and a higher priced quarterback to kind of split those points up more across your roster to, I mean, basically doing the opposite of what I traditionally like to do, which is condense my points. But if I'm desperate enough, I'm going to need to take the upside other places.
Sure.
Because I didn't draft well enough. And that's sometimes just how it pans out.
Yeah, I mean, if he doesn't get that IR designation, I almost think that you have to carry him, or like Frankie said, try to trade him and try to move him for bits and pieces. But at this point, you have to carry him because his upside and what he can do for you long term is going to be the key here. I mean, Jerry Judy is one of those sought after weapons that any offense looks for, and fantasy wise, he's going to put up numbers once he gets healthy from what we hope to be just a high ankle sprain. If you can carry him on your bench, if you have that ability to essentially waste a spot for a few weeks, there's probably plenty of options that aren't taken in your leagues depending on how big they are. But, you can look at potential options like Rondale Moore, who really showed up this week, or something like that, where you'll be able to replace some of those catches and those receptions, and hopefully you won't be without him for too long.
Rondale Moore did have a nice day today.
I mean, even like searching for other guys too. I mean, there are plenty of guys who should have had good days who didn't have good days today. Maybe you find a guy who had a down day and you're like, hey, the upside with Judy's great.
I mean, you're not flipping Judy 1 for 1 for a guy who had one down day today. Like if I'm a Brandon Naiuk manager who literally didn't register a target today and someone offered me Jerry Judy right now, I'm still turning that down because at least Brandon Naiuk is.
Oh no, I'm not talking like 1 for 1. I'm talking like, maybe throwing him in, a lower tier running back. I mean, again, this is all roster dependent too. It is. It's basically
a trick question, Frankie.
it's looking
all the answers are wrong.
It's looking at who you're trying. It's looking at who you're trying to trade with and what you yourself have to work with.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
It's going to be an individually based question, essentially. Do you have the room to carry him? If not, what can you package to somebody else who needs a quarterback, who needs maybe you have a top 5 tight end where you can get a lower tier tight end or something like that, which honestly I don't suggest, but it's an opportunity if you can't hold on to him to maybe score on some of his potential value.
Totally fair. I think I'm closer to just a flat drop than you guys are if I have to, not because I don't like the talent, but just because the length of the injury. I hope that he just gets put on IR so that way he can be stashed. But if he's not, that's a really long time to hold on to a guy who, it takes a while to come back from high ankle sprains. Even when he comes back after that, he might not be 100%. We're probably looking at to return to 100% closer to 9 to 10 weeks.
Listen,
so that's for me. That's closer to a ship him if you can for 50 cents on the dollar. Maybe hold him for a week or two to ease the impact of the injury a little bit to whoever you're shipping him to, make it a little bit more palatable. But ultimately, I'm willing to drop him flat out if I have to with that injury if he doesn't get tagged with the IR. Next one on the injury list today, a fan favorite, Ryan Fitzpatrick, unfortunately went down with a hip subluxation, which I've honestly never heard of before, but it doesn't sound comfortable. He's scheduled to get an MRI Monday to determine the extent of the damage, but as we've said before, anytime you're slated to get an MRI, it's generally not just to go in there because you like being inside the machine. He's probably going to miss some time. Taylor Heineke came in to replace him after he went down with that injury. Threw for 122 yards and a touchdown. Obviously, if Fitzpatrick is slated to miss any actual amount of time and Heineke has to take the reins, that's a huge downgrade for all of the options in that offense. I mean, the performance bump that F1 was getting in the offseason was entirely due to the fact that he had a real quarterback for once, and that's out the window now. So are you at all worried about Antonio Gibson or F1 or Logan Thomas even? Do all these guys still retain their value to you, or are they all taking a step? Because in my eyes, they're all taking a step back to me. F1's going from low-end wide receiver 1 to mid-range wide receiver 2. Logan Thomas is probably a low-end tight end 1 now. Antonio Gibson doesn't retain the same, running back 1 upside he had.
Yeah, I think the only person's fantasy upside who goes up is Taylor Heineke.
So the one that no one wants.
Yeah, watching that game, that was the hit was pretty rough. He went up and then he went right back down. So I don't think he's gonna be back soon.
I missed the hit itself. So
yeah, it was one of those ones where he comes and he's like, yeah, I'm good. Nope.
Stands
up,
goes to shake it off.
He is.
Nope.
Yeah, I am not happy to be a manager for any of those players right now. If I have them in any leagues, I pretty much agree with all your sentiment that all of them are taking a step. I mean, this kind of reminds me of last year when Dak went down, except worse, because I would say Dak at the point that he went down last year was leaps and bounds above Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, I think the only person who could possibly benefit from this would be either Antonio Gibson or J.D. McKissick. I think it's the running backs that really are going to see a lot more workload here. I think that they're going to be relied upon to ball control this offense a little bit more. They're going to try to keep the ball on the ground, keep that clock moving, and hopefully they can move in between the 20s and then give it to Heineke to get to Logan Thomas or to Terry McLaurin or somebody like that. But if I'm a Terry McLaurin owner, if I'm a deep leagues, Cam Sims or Dimey Brown owner, I'm looking in the mirror and saying this is not a good situation for me.
See, I'm actually if I had to pick one that I thought was going to have some upside here, I'm actually betting on Logan Thomas, if only because Ryan Fitzpatrick really hyper targets the wide receiver position over the course of his career, and that was a big reason why we were on the show. We're sort of downgrading Logan Thomas over the course of the offseason because history shows that he doesn't target his tight ends like other quarterbacks do. He was a hyper targeted tight end last season. I could see Heineke leaning on him, but I see where you're coming from. Either 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Either the running backs or the tight end. One of them is going to be the safety blanket for Heineke. It's just going to sort of depend to see who that works out to be. But so it sucks. It sucks for F1 who's going to have to wait a little bit longer to maybe have his true breakout season.
Yeah, and without Curtis Samuel there, they're really kind of pushing for how do we get this ball down the field, and F1, as you like to call him, is he's going to be seeing a lot of double coverage, and Taylor Heineke's not the guy who's putting that ball in between a small window. So I think that they have to become more efficient on the ground. and with the dump off ball, and I think that'll benefit the running backs and the tight end here.
Totally fair. Final injury news that I saw of note for the day was, at least for players that, went out and didn't come back, or in this case, never actually went on the field, it seemed like. Brandon Naiuk did not receive a target today. He was seen on the side of San Francisco milk cartons all over the city. And post-game, it came out this was reportedly due to an injury that wasn't announced. First of all, bleep you, Kyle Shanahan, report your injuries.
True.
But second of all, does this worry? Like, we've seen receivers, be ghost actives before and still at least get targeted. This worry either you guys at all as far as Ayuk's future that he didn't even get looked towards today? And this is a game where the Lions almost caught up. Like they ran it a bunch, sure, but they were throwing to stay ahead of the Lions because what initially looked like a rout turned into an actual football game late.
Yeah, I mean, especially with where people draft Ayuk, which is probably around the 4th or 5th round, depending, if he fell or, people took him high. We know San Francisco likes to run the ball, but last year, especially in the second half of the year, Ayuk looked great. And with Debo, having the injury bug that he usually does, we kind of expected him to be the one on this team. And the fact that he wasn't targeted at all kind of is a little bit worrying for me if I drafted him.
I did. Thank you for asking.
And the Lions, historically as of last year at least, were the worst defense in football.
They still looked really bad today.
Yeah, they put up 44 points on them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, still one of the worst defenses in football, but yeah, no, and the fact that he wasn't targeted or, used is kind of worrying to me. And it's not because it was a situation that we saw when we were watching the Packers game where they were just getting blown out, so they just took him out of the game. It was that it was a close game and he was still not being used. So I'm worried.
Pretty worried, I got to be honest, because the fact that this injury crept up and there was not a single sound from the organization about what he's dealing with. Until we know exactly what's going on with him, I'm on pretty much red alert right now because Ayuk is one of those guys where you drafted him semi-early to be a playmaker for this team. And at this point, it doesn't seem like, Deebo Samuel's going to give up that wide receiver 1 spot now. And, with everything else going on in San Francisco, I'm not sure that Ayuk is in a position to really be that guy anymore. I'm all flustered with Ayuk and what I saw or didn't see today.
Sure. Literally, I watched this entire game, and during the game, I was Googling Ayuk. Did he change his number? Is he getting passes, and I'm just not aware of it? Nope, he's still the same number out there. Just Kyle Shanahan apparently said after the game that it was due to a hamstring tweak, and that Trent Sherfield has been performing so well that they felt he deserved a spot. But that,
who?
That just exactly. That feels like coach speak to me, from the king of coach speak. And I'm just sitting here in my bunker with my tinfoil hat on, just being like, where is he? What's wrong with him? Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as you guys, where it might be nothing. It's week 1. I'm gonna try and not overreact about it, but not even receiving a target for what the coach described as a tweaked hamstring. Maybe it's just disrespecting the Lions. He didn't feel like he needed to use his best receiver against them. I don't know, but
apparently he didn't.
But I don't love it. I'm hoping to get some clarity next week. At least maybe they can declare him out if they're not going to use him next time. But that's all I had for news today. Did you guys have anything that you wanted to mention before we jump into the show?
No. I think that covers most of the painful points of today.
Fortunately, there wasn't too. This is actually a pretty good news segment for following week 1. Only 4 major injuries,
and only 2 of them on my team.
Yeah, I was gonna say most of them on my team.
Well, Frankie is a curse, so.
Yeah.
So it all stems back to when he opened that old Egyptian tomb. All right. Before we jump into the 3 and outs for the day, be sure to follow us on social media if you like the content we're bringing to the table. At the Fantasy 4-Pack, at Fantasy4P_Ian, at Senpai Koala, and at the Foon. And you can find Mike at TrashTalk_media. You can also follow our YouTube channels. Link is in the in the bio on our Twitter page. Mike, is yours on your Twitter page as well?
Yes, it is also youtube.com/TrashTalkSports.
That's where you can find all of us. If you like what we're bringing here today, make sure to go slap a follow on that, share it with your friends, put it on at your barbershop, put it on for your pet rock while you're at work, whatever you want. The views are always appreciated. All right, Mike, why don't you take us away with your first 3 and out as the guest on the show? What was the first thing that jumped off the page at you today?
Yeah, for sure. And we kind of talked about this pre-show, but Melvin Gordon really popped off the page, and I'm sure a lot of fantasy owners who selected Melvin Gordon, whether it was begrudgingly or not, decided that that he is going to be their workhorse. And I want to temper a bit of the expectations that Melvin Gordon now has around him, because while he did rush for over 100 yards and a touchdown today, I do want to say that 70 of those yards came on 1 carry. So that means the other 10 carries that he had netted 30 yards. That is not great. And when you're looking at Melvin Gordon, sure, he has obviously some upside here, especially with the revamped offense. But with the Jerry Judy injury, people can key on Melvin Gordon a little more. So I'm not exactly sure that Melvin Gordon needs to be the guy that you guys want to bet the house on. I think you got to just temper the expectations around Gordon.
It's totally fair. I mean, I didn't watch this game perfectly, but I looked at the box score, following the game, and I mean, he saw less carries than Javonte Williams, like three less carries overall. They spent a high pick on the kid. I didn't ever really expect Gordon to be the guy this season, so I think that's a measured way to approach this, because the chances of him breaking off let's call it for what is a day-saving touch like that on a week-to-week basis are slim to none. Like, sure, it was against the Giants, and the Giants are a great defense, and that's going to stymie your rushing production. But still, 11 carries. What do you have? 3 catches? Like, that's just not the volume you need for a guy to really perform as even your RB2. That's flex production.
Well, yeah, it's like what Mike was saying. This isn't the guy that I'm gonna. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's going. I mean, we kind of saw it being a 50-50 split. But if I have to pick a guy here, it's going to be Javonte Williams, because the coaches have already said they like him a lot. They've said they intend on using him a lot. Melvin Gordon, I mean, again, take away that 70-yard rush, he was outperformed by him. So everything that I've expected so far has happened in this Denver offense. I mean, minus Judy going out with an injury, but
he is 28 too, which is a year past running back's expiration date.
Yeah, so. He is getting towards that almost 30 side, and we know what happens to running backs once they hit that upper age.
Let's see here too. I'm curious what their snap count is. Yeah, it looks like he split snaps dead even with Williams too. So, I'm not expecting anything big from Gordon. I think that's a smart way to approach that. Honestly, he's probably a sell high if you want to target your Raheem Mostert manager in your league and try and get some sweet trade drippings off that team, because it can only go down from here, in my opinion.
I'll tell you, if you have Melvin Gordon and Jerry Judy, you might want to package them together and see what you can get out of it.
Sure, I mean Jerry Judy's an attractive enough name. You might be able to get some takers on that, especially following a week one performance like that. All right, I'll jump in here with my first take. It's a guy that I'm gonna have. I did it last year with Justin Herbert. It's just becoming a trend. Every year, I'm just wrong about someone in the draft. And this year, it's Devonta Smith. He made that clear immediately. I So I watched this entire game because obviously there was a lot of fans implications in this game. Getting to see his first game in the NFL, getting to see Kyle Pitts' first game in the NFL. Is Jalen Hurts a real quarterback? Who's going to be the target hog behind Calvin Ridley? Can Mike Davis actually run the football? What does the new Falcons offense look like? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I was very interested in this game from a fantasy performance, and Devonta Smith turned out. I mean, 6 for 8 for 71 yards and a touchdown. He caught that touchdown early, and it was a nice long one. He looked great every time the ball was coming his way. I mean, he did have one kind of ugly drop, but I mean, I don't care about drops on this. Drops mean you're getting targeted. Like you can't drop the football if you're not getting targeted with the football. You know who else had a lot of drops? Tyreek Hill. Like, not today, but in general. So I'm not worried about the drop. The Eagles kept going back to him. Obviously, he ended up getting 8 targets on the day. He just consistently looked great. He was converting for first downs all the time, and he actually was doing a good job with rub routes and blocking routes as well. It's like he looked like a natural at whatever he was doing out in the field. He immediately dispelled my fears that he was too small to play in the NFL because we've seen time and time again receivers at his size fail at the NFL level, except for Deshaun Jackson, and I think that's it.
Another Eagles legend.
I mean, he looked good.
I mean, I'm not entirely sure. Well, okay, let me not say I'm not entirely sure. The only reason I would have been on Devonta Smith is because I didn't know what Jalen Hurts, how he was going to do. I've liked Devonta Smith, especially for his price too, being, the one on that team going in like the 8th, 9th round. And
I will say I also was worried in draft season that he was going to be going more in the Jamar Chase range. With him, going that much further back.
Yeah,
it's easier to like.
He was very easy to like for me anyways. And now that we've seen that he is, I would say, the solidified one on that team as far as, where the ball is going, at least. Maybe not, stat line wise, but I'm pretty sure it's also stat line wise. I haven't looked at the box score, but just, it's not the size of him that I like. It's the talent at the wide receiver position. We have seen guys get bullied out of that before, but I think that he's kind of just like I know college is different than NFL, but we saw him bullying whoever was covering him in that championship game just to no end. And I think that, he's probably going to have a little bit more trouble against those elite corners and not the, paper bag Falcons. But, I think that if you got him late, you got a really good receiver there.
Yeah, I mean, Devonta Smith, obviously being the highly touted wide receiver coming out of Alabama that he was, you wanted to see, could he do that outside of Alabama? Could he manage in the NFL against bigger, stronger corners? What would they do if they pressed up against him? And he kind of showed that his speed was going to outmatch any strength at the line of scrimmage. So I have a lot of upside for Devonta Smith and kind of what he brings to the table. I think that the rapport that he has with Jalen Hurts really showed, and I believe at the end of the day, his speed is going to be something that we're going to all be in awe of. He's going to remind us a lot of the Deshaun Jacksons of the world and kind of figure out that, he's going to burn defenses left, right, and center.
Yeah, I mean, he looked like he couldn't be touched out there. He was just slipping by defensive backs left and right. It's like it doesn't matter how small you are. If people can't get their hands on you, you're gonna run buck wild into the end zone. So I loved watching him. It was an exciting performance for the rookie. I thought that he looked like and Jaylen Waddle and Jamar Chase had great days today too. But I thought he looked like the clear and away best rookie on the day. Frankie, what's your first takeaway?
Well, I'm going to respectfully disagree there.
Yeah, I know you are.
No, we were talking about this a little bit pre-show. Going into the season with, the wide receiving core and Cincy looking like, T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd both being very competent receivers in their own right, it was kind of hard to peg where Jamar Chase was going to, just overall land in this offense because that's a lot of mouths to feed. After week 1, and looking at, a relatively similar split, in targets, if you compare Chase's to T. Higgins, who I thought Higgins was going to be the one just overall, and I think he still is probably going to be the one. But
I believe he was targeted for the first touchdown, so I would still slot him in as the one on that team.
But yeah, just looking at their stat lines, I mean, Chase was 5 for 7 for 101 in a TD. Higgins 4 for 5 for 58 in a TD. I think that just looking at like Tyler Boyd's stat line too, 3 for 32. I think that we're gonna kind of see him shuffled out more than Jamar having to work his way in.
Sure.
And I think looking at it as a whole, it's more of like, it's not a who's the wide receiver 1, who's the wide receiver 2 on this team. It's going to be who's the 1A and 1B, because I think that having two dynamic receivers like that is going to allow both of them to work really well off of each other. And again, their defense didn't get better, so they're going to throw the ball a lot. And even in a positive game script where they were up 21-7 at one point, they were still throwing the ball, and that's when Jamar Chase's touchdown came in. He was the one who put them up 21-7. Like, looking at the rookie wide receivers this week, I mean, Waddle looked great out there too. Smith looked great. I would say, for me anyways, where you're drafting Chase, he didn't blow what you drafted him for out of the water at all. I mean, I think he kind of dropped. He returned where you drafted him. Smith and Waddle both outperformed their draft position. I think that, I don't know, it's hard to tell where it's going to be at the end of the year, but I am happy with Chase right now. I think, I mean, at least from what I saw, because I was watching some highlights back before the show too, and I mean, he was burning guys on routes similar to Devonta Smith. So I think it's going to be a race to see who has the better fantasy finish at the end of the year. But right now, my money, just based on how the offense is going to perform, is probably going to be Chase.
Yeah, I mean, Jamar Chase, he looked good out there. And I think he put some of the questions to bed that he created himself when he said that he struggled seeing the ball because it didn't have the white stripe that the college football has. And so I think fantasy owners who had drafted him as high as they did were a little worried after that comment. But
I was worried.
Nonetheless, yeah, I can imagine. But nonetheless, he put on quite a show, and obviously has the chemistry like Devonta Smith and Jalen Hurts that I talked about with Joe Burrow from their time at LSU. Jamar Chase is one of those guys that has immediate chemistry, immediate electricity with his quarterback. And, again, the one thing that, I'm here to temper expectations apparently tonight. But the idea is that Jamar Chase did have a 50-yard touchdown in the final minute of the first half. So that's something to watch out for, because he did, again, ended with 101 receiving yards. So without that 50-yard touchdown, say it went for 25 and didn't score, he's looking at 76 yards, no touchdown. That's a lot different than what he actually put out on the field.
Sure, I agree. I mean, that's ultimately why I say that I believe that Devonta Smith had the better rookie day, because I watching the game, I felt that he had the more complete day of the three rookies. But Jamar Chase, you speak of the chemistry that he and Burrow have together. I think that helped that really did help put to bed a lot of those worries. I mean, people were talking about how he couldn't catch a cold in camp. Not worrying about drops is one thing, but when you literally can't catch a football, like that's, people are saying it's the year off from football was giving him the yips, or whatever you want to call it, and it was taking him some time to shake off that rust. I think the rust is easier to shake off when you're playing with a guy that you're already very familiar with. So, I'm happy the day was as productive for him as it was. I like to see people succeed in the NFL, and to his credit, he did look good out there. But yeah, he might be another one that you may consider selling high on if you don't think that what he did was repeatable. If you think that Tyler Boyd still got some juice left in the tank, because Burrow did only throw 27 times today. Burrow threw less times than Joe Mixon ran. Mixon had 29 carries today. If you hadn't checked the box score, Frankie. Yeah, so that's an offense that is just all question marks right now, because we expect them to be a 40-45 attempt a game offense. So definitely one you're going to have to attach your peepers to and keep a watch on in the future, because it's going to get more confusing before it gets less confusing, I guarantee you.
For sure.
Mike, what's your second takeaway?
An interesting one, and one that I've had my eye on for a while now. Corey Davis.
I love it.
And I know I tell people to temper expectations. Go hog wild with this guy, because the connection that he has with Zach Wilson is what fantasy owners should absolutely dream of. I mean, this guy is looked to in every sort of situation that the Jets are going to find themselves in. With the lackluster offensive line, Corey Davis is the security blanket for this quarterback. He is the guy that is going on deep routes. He is going to just absolutely torch defenses. And he showed a little bit of that in Tennessee, and obviously why he's such a high-paid free agent to come to New York. But what he was able to do with Zach Wilson, and we saw it progressing through the preseason, Zach Wilson loves Corey Davis. And to put up, he caught 5 of 7 targets for 97 yards, 2 scores. I'm not saying he's going to do that every single week, but I expect him to be in the end zone almost every single game. And I think he's going to really flourish on the fantasy box score for whoever owns him.
I mean, that's totally fair. Funny you mentioned Corey Davis, because there was a handful of us on the show who are big Corey Davis truthers this season. He was just kind of a perennial black sheep for fantasy wide receivers, always disappointing fantasy managers, until last year when he finally had his breakout season, got paid by the Jets, and he looked great this offseason. I agree. I was thrilled to see him go off today. I mean, sure, it was against the Panthers defense, but I mean, the Jets don't have the hardest schedule either, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that, I mean, we saw Jaylen Waddle light up the Patriots this week. They get the Broncos after that. That's a tough defense. But they get the Titans, the Falcons, the Patriots again, the Bengals, the Colts. Like, there's a string of soft defenses that Corey Davis is going to get. I love pushing Corey Davis here. I think he's in for quite the season for fantasy.
Yeah, and I agree that I think he is going to be that security blanket for Zach Wilson, just on the type of receiver that he is. He is the guy who's going to run a lot of those short routes and those in routes, just running across the field. And I mean, he's got the speed to just beat those inside linebackers and just take a short ball to the house. It's, again, I'm not saying he's going to go off for 2 touchdowns every week, but I do kind of have that sentiment that,
I mean, that'd be a bold prediction if you were calling for that. So
maybe that'll be one of my hot takes.
Please
but
don't.
Luckily for you, I do not have any shares of him, but I think he's going to be one of those guys where, because of the the fact that he's a security blanket, he has that single touchdown upside every single week.
So I'm gonna go back to a slight downturn with my second take here. We talked about it a little bit during the news, so I'll keep this one a little bit shorter. But oh man, Brandon Naiuk, like, I thought we were drafting a receiver, not a magician. This guy pulled the disappearing act this week, and it was rough, especially when we got to see Trent Sherfield have a good day and Deebo Samuel rack up 189 yards. Like, it seemed like everyone had, aside from Raheem Mostert, everyone had good days. And meanwhile, Ayuk's just sitting over here on the bench, like, don't forget about me, guys. Just like waving his foam finger, like, oh man, I hated watching it more than words really can say. I guess to sort of reiterate what we talked about in the news section, like, I'm legitimately worried about this guy. We know how tricky it's the whole reason why Shanahanigans is a term. We know how tricky Kyle Shanahan can be, how much he likes to mess with his personnel on a week-to-week basis. Who gets touches, who doesn't. It's like the physical manifestation of what people believe about Belichick. Ayuk's gonna have good weeks, but this doesn't inspire confidence in me. This smells like it's gonna be a up and down season where sometimes he has great weeks and sometimes he has 0 weeks, a la Mike Evans.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I don't want to echo too much what I said, in the news section, but this was an interesting day for Ayuk, and I mean, I wouldn't expect this every week, but if he's gonna not carry an injury designation and they're prepared to not throw to him, I don't know how safe I am rolling him out there in my, if it's a 2 wide receiver or 3 wide receiver league. I mean, obviously you're rolling him out there somewhere, probably, but
I mean, I already benched him next week for Odell Beckham, and Odell Beckham was out this week.
So. Yeah, I mean, I would do the same thing just based on, what happened this week. I'm gonna wait for that, the injury news to come out, whether it's a substantial injury or if it's just a tweak. And I think now, based on just what we saw, he might just be a matchup play.
Yeah, that's kind of painful for where most people were looking to draft him too. I mean, you like I said before, you were relying on this guy, and for him to not even get looked at by the quarterback, he might not have even looked at him on the sideline. I honestly don't know at this point. Nyuk is just one of those guys where I don't think he can be trusted. I think that there is a lot of trust issues going on with this offense, and we talked about the running back situation there. We talked about Nyuk. I mean, San Francisco just seems like a hotbed for question marks.
Fair enough. Frankie, what's your second take here?
Well, we know how much I love Naji Harris coming into the season.
Very lukewarm.
Yes, very lukewarm. Not the he's a must start, you must draft him. He's going to be a top 10 guy next year. Just based on the volume he's going to get alone. Today was not a good look. And it was unfortunate that he was going up against Buffalo, their defense has looked phenomenal over the past couple seasons. He didn't get the volume that all of the coaches and everybody was saying he was going to get. But I think that part of that is due to how bad this game was going for the Steelers.
Yeah, the Steelers were struggling heavily in this game.
I mean, granted, I watched all of this game for the most part. There were a couple of drops that he had out of the backfield where, I think that's just going to happen in your first game as a rookie. I mean, we talked about Smith having some drops. I think he's just kind of getting his feet under him, and I think that the thing that I liked the most about how he was playing too was when you were watching him kind of go on those swing routes outside, he was very patient about finding where to go with the ball. And I think that the talent is there. I think that, the biggest concern that you had, and I know Vitali showed this one, was the offensive line going into the season. And that did show a lot in this game. I think that...
Shocker. 5 guys who couldn't make it onto the field last season weren't better than the guys who could. Ooh.
I think... they're still playing at an NFL level, and I think that he kind of just got the unfortunate circumstance of going up against Buffalo, who is a very staunch defense. And, I think that in better matchups, he's going to have a better day, and he's going to be able to have that volume that everybody talks so highly of him having. But he kind of almost got game scripted out of this game. He had 16 carries for 45. He wasn't very efficient. A lot of that was due to the line. Again, I think the talent is there, and I'm not worried about the volume he's going to have over the course of the year. If you look at his schedule, the next game's at the Raiders, then he gets the Bengals, then he gets the Packers. He gets the Broncos, which is kind of an iffy one. We saw that today with Saquon. Seahawks, Browns, another iffy one. He's got a couple of hard games in the middle of the schedule, but I think overall, he's looking to have a pretty good year. And if I can get him, for the low as you can get for a first round guy, sometimes back at the start of the second round guy, I'm trying to go for him.
Yeah, so even on our show, when we talked about Naji Harris and kind of what we expected coming out of the draft, my question marks were never about what he can do on the football field. Never. It's what the Pittsburgh Steelers are putting around him. You have an ancient quarterback who basically lost a limb by the end of last season, a decimated offensive line where they up and released their all-pro right guard for no apparent reason. You can't tell me that David DeCastro did not belong on this offensive line. I refuse to believe it. And then on top of that, you're talking about a passing offense where Mike Tomlin is looking to bring in Juju and Clay Chase Claypool, and all these guys. They're trying to get the ball out and really move it around. I think Naji Harris can do so many things, but there's so many other factors outside of him working against him that he is a tough matchup to really pay attention to, unless you see that the offensive line is starting to progress, until you see that they have more of a conviction to run the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I'm officially worried about Najee after this game. I agree with you, not because of his talent level, but because of this offensive line. We've seen this with Nick Chubb, where who I've gone on record stating I think he's the best pure runner in the NFL at this point in time, and you can't run behind a bad offensive line after a certain point. I mean, Saquon Barkley showed that today too. He was getting decimated, and he's one of the best running backs in the NFL. Buffalo is a staunch defense, yes, but they were susceptible to the run last season. Top 8 worst defenses against the run. They didn't really do that much to change that in the offseason. They unless everyone just suddenly realized how to run, how to stop the run, they should still be a fairly mediocre run defense, and Najee couldn't find any room. And I don't know, I'm worried that this one might just be a low yardage volume play this season, because as talented as the kid is, he's going to have to do it all himself if this is what this offensive line is going to be.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the offensive line needs a ton of work, and again, maybe they can figure out a way to get David DeCastro back. Maybe they can figure out a way to kind of work some of these free agents in there. But at this point, what I saw from this offensive line, even Big Ben was struggling behind them. And you can point to the fact that they played Buffalo all you want. The fact of the matter is, this is going to be a habitual thing week in and week out, and it doesn't matter who's on the other side of that offensive line. They're going to get pressure both in the run and the pass, and it's not going to look pretty for Naji Harris.
Yeah, it's going to be an issue. All right, Mike, what's your final take for your 3 and out today?
All right, a guy that I have been super high on, and I've talked a lot about, and I just think that he is destined for greatness this year, and maybe I'm just buying into the hype, but Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray had an absolute monster day, and not yardage-wise, only 289 yards, so sub 300, but 4 touchdowns, and he did have that interception. And listen, I will say to just be cautious, because Tennessee's defense is not what it once was, even a couple of years ago. But what I saw Kyler Murray do, the command in this offense that he has, the way he was able to distribute the ball. DeAndre Hopkins had 6 catches for 83 yards, 2 touchdowns. Christian Kirk, 5 catches for 70 yards and 2 touchdowns. You had Rondale Moore, who really showed up, 4 catches, 68 yards, who I talked about earlier in the show. A.J. Green didn't even get a chance to get involved in this offense. And I think Kyler Murray is one of those guys that has so many weapons around him, has such a command of this Cliff Kingsbury offense, that he is going to be able to dissect defenses with speed, with precision. I think Kyler Murray is going to be the dark horse MVP candidate that we're all looking for.
Oh, I totally agree. When I was statting out quarterbacks this season, I had Kyler Murray as far and away my top quarterback on the season. I mean, the rushing upside that he presents with just the sheer amount of passing volume that he has, it's insane. I mean, he's got easy 800-yard, maybe 1,000-yard rushing upside, which really you can only say Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson have. But he's a very proficient passer on top of that. I love what this kid brings to the table. I've been screaming from the rooftops about this kid for 2 years. I love seeing him go out there and perform. I think Rondale Moore is exactly what this team needed.
Yeah, Kyler Murray, I mean, at least to me anyways, has always kind of been that, he's always had that super high potential. And, I mean, he showed it last year, and I think this year, I mean, if this game is any indication, he's taken that step forward, and he very well could finish as the QB1 just because of that rushing upside. But, I mean, if you're throwing 4 touchdowns in a game,
it helps having Nyuk Hopkins as your number 1 wide receiver.
I would say, I mean, if you're also throwing 4 touchdowns and have that rushing upside, that's a whole nother story.
That's what you call a cheat code.
Yeah, it's basically Pat Mahomes, but better. I mean, Pat Mahomes has that little bit of rushing upside, but it's nowhere close to Kyler's. It's insane. And just watching him work on the field and the way he kind of just runs with the football it's just so fun to watch.
He's like a gyroscope when he runs. Like he hits angles that you don't think it should be humanly possible to hit. It's like he's got to fall over now at this point, right? And he just rights the top and keeps going. It's like, oh, okay, I guess that's fine. His ankles don't obey physics. Cool. Like I love watching him play. He's so exciting to watch.
Yeah, I mean, even the next couple of matchups, in 3 of his next 4 games are Minnesota, Jacksonville, San Francisco.
Sure.
I think that he's going to have an absolute field day. And, you know, the one thing I will say is he has the Rams, but those divisional games, he knows how to play those. And I think it's going to be one of the top storylines for weeks to come is that Kyler Murray is lighting the league up.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, like we've seen good defenses get beat by good quarterbacks. It's an offensive league now. As good a defense as you are, especially in the regular season, sometimes, you know, because no one's going like it's a playoff game. Sometimes a good quarterback just gets the better of you. You know, you didn't roll out of bed and give it your all, and all of a sudden,
look at the Chiefs game today. Like that Cleveland defense was looking like it was trouncing them, and then, you know, the Pat Mahomes effect comes out, throws 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, Andy Dalton just put up 200 against the Rams, so I'm color me curious about if their defense is actually able to stop, you know, full on stop good quarterbacks. If Andy Dalton can throw 200 yards against the Rams. All right, for my final take here, I'm going to talk about a guy that I've talked about often this offseason, but I'm going back to the well because Nick Chubb backed up all of my positive thoughts and reinforcements that I sent his way by dropping an absolute monster of a game to start the season. And he could have done more too, but he unfortunately coughed up a late fumble that probably, maybe not cost his team the game, but their win percentage went down from 75 to 55 when he coughed up the fumble. But 15 carries, 83 yards, 2 huge those touchdown runs were things of beauty, just breaking around the edge and heading straight for pay dirt. I love watching this kid run. Plus, he actually got some work in through the air today. It was only 2 catches, but that might as well be 20 catches when Nick Chubb is concerned.
Kareem Hunt who?
I mean, Kareem Hunt did still get some work today. I believe Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb total 111 yards, so Kareem Hunt, you know, logged close to 40. I'm not worried about Kareem Hunt at all in this offense. This goes back to what I was saying all offseason, where you should be buying in at Nick Chubb at an elite level. You should be considering him over guys like Derrick Henry and some of these other tier 2 running backs. You know, not quite the tier 1s, the Alvin Kamaras and the Dalvin Cooks and the CMCs, but consider him like a Derrick Henry. Take him after, you know, Zeke and Aaron Jones are gone because of what he showed today. His crazy nose for the end zone. This guy scores like no other running back in football, combined with the fact that he can just run. He can run really, like, he picked up right where he left off. Averaged 5.5 yards per carry today, which is what he averaged the entirety of last season. If this is what he's bringing to the table again, which it shouldn't surprise anyone that it is, he is going to be fantasy salvation for fantasy managers because you got him late in the first round. You probably stacked him with a Joe Mixon or a Naji or an Eckler or another one of these guys, and he is part of a dynamic duo on your squad that is just almost impossible to match because of the discount you were getting on a guy that shouldn't have been going that late. I love seeing what he did today. Can't wait for it to continue.
Yeah, I mean, you know my feelings on Chubb. In our league anyways, I plan on taking him in my later pick, and I probably would have taken him with an earlier pick too, assuming Aaron Jones isn't there, because we all know my feelings. Nick Chubb is my Aaron Jones to you.
I mean, I've loved him since college. I think that I think the fact that he doesn't get involved in the passing game is incredibly overrated because of what he can do on the ground. And really, when you factor in most running backs in the NFL nowadays don't get involved, like unless you're an Alvin Kamara or CMC or sometimes Dalvin Cook, like Zeke doesn't get involved in the passing game that much. Not enough that it matters, you know, incredibly over Nick Chubb. Chubb gets more passing volume than Derrick Henry. Like Jonathan Taylor, Najee Harris, all these guys are getting comparable amounts of targets to him, but he's being taken after them.
Yeah, I mean, Nick Chubb, I've always been high on Nick Chubb, even coming out of college. Being a Patriots fan, I wanted the Nick Chubb to go to the Patriots over Sony Michel. So it's just one of those things where I've always been high on Nick Chubb, and he's just reaffirming that based on what we saw against Kansas City, 83 yards, 2 touchdowns. And, you talked about the fumble lost. That's not going to continue to happen. I fully expect that he has a potential to be in the top 5, maybe even top 3 or 1 of the rushing leaders this year.
Sure.
With Kevin Stefanski's absolute mindset of just running and pounding the rock behind 2 tight end sets, it sucks for Browns wide receivers in fantasy because you can't really trust the output of, Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham Jr., or even Donovan Peoples-Jones. But at the end of the day, you can trust Nick Chubb and you can trust Kareem Hunt. I think these 2 guys are going to be special in this offense. And, anybody who's worried about the split in carries, Chubb saw 17 touches, Kareem Hunt saw 9. So that should tell you exactly where Kevin Stefanski is with these 2 guys.
Yeah, I mean, they wouldn't have signed Chubb to that big extension in the offseason if they didn't want to use him as the bell cow. They put their money where their mouth is, and it's showing up on the field. All right, Frankie, why don't you round us out here? What's your final take?
I've been wanting to, kind of just flourish about this since Thursday night.
Flourish?
I don't know the proper term. We'll say flourish. Initially, when we were, coming off the Dak injury, we didn't know what kind of game script Dallas was going to run, whether it was going to be let Zeke eat or they were going to kind of ease him back in. They said they weren't going to overwork Dak. Wow, he looked good. And that is because we got a large sample size of how much he's going to throw the football. 42 on 58 for 403 TDs. 1 pick that wasn't his fault. Shout out to CeeDee Lamb. I thought the most staggering thing here, for me anyways, was the fact that, Zeke was kind of a non-factor. And instead of kind of, trying to get him involved a little bit more, they were just like, we're just going to overwork Dak. But he looked good. Like, the throws he was making to these receivers were phenomenal. Like, he was hitting guys in really tight windows. He was putting balls on dimes, just moving around in the pocket. And I think that the thing that I noticed the most about what was happening with Dak is because he didn't have a knee injury. What we see a lot with these quarterbacks that have knee injuries is they're kind of scared to move around in the pocket. They're kind of got the shakes, and they're kind of seeing ghost where
Hesitant to take a hit.
Yeah, he doesn't want to take that hit, so he's not going to move around as much. He's going to kind of just let the pocket do whatever. But because it was an ankle injury, he was still able to move around. I mean, he wasn't running around like he usually does, but he wasn't scared to just stay in there and take the hit. There were a couple times where he was just eating these, tackles and still getting the ball off perfectly to where it needed to be. And CeeDee Lamb had a great day. Amari Cooper had a better day. Unfortunately, Gallup went down, but I think that Dak is back. I think that he's looking to pick up where he left off. And I think that going forward, I am not worried about the kind of numbers he's going to put up because this offense looks like, granted they lost to the Bucs, but that was a really close game. And,
they lost in Cowboys fashion.
If we lost in Cowboys fashion, we would have blown like a 30-point lead. But, I'm not worried at all. He looked good. The wide receiving core looked good. If Zeke picks it up, I think that Dak's numbers are going to be phenomenal this season.
Yeah, Dak Prescott kind of picked up where he left off, and just taking a look at the numbers, if Dak kept up what he was doing last year, and I'm not saying he would have been just shy of 6,000 yards passing. We're talking about a guy that can really sling the ball with the best of them. I'd put him up against Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, any of these guys, Tom Brady, and really sling it. And we saw it on that Thursday night matchup. He was matching Brady for throw, and really going at this Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. Dak Prescott's one of those guys that you can't count out, and you saw exactly, if he's going to be overworked, that's one thing. But at the end of the day, he showed that he can handle a 58 attempt night against one of the most stout and pulverizing defenses you're going to see in the NFL.
Yeah, I love Dak. I mean, I think it's a funny stat. It's just a week 1 stat. It's obviously going to come down, but Dak Prescott is currently on pace for 6,851 yards.
I mean, just one last thing to mention too about Dak. You mentioned that he just kept going at this defense. I forget who on the defensive side of the ball went out. I think it was one of their starting corners or their linebackers, and everybody expected him to hyper target Gallup or Lamb, whoever was coming across the middle, and he was still just taking shots outside. Like, yeah. He's not going to take the easy way out. He's going to, show that he is a good quarterback. He is going to throw the ball where he wants to put the ball. And I think that that's the biggest thing for me is that he's not afraid to challenge these tough defenses.
Yeah, no qualms there. I love it. All right. Well, that'll do it for our 3 and outs for the day. As I mentioned before, if you like the content we're bringing to you, if you want to get more of that, hit that notification bell, hit the subscribe button, make sure you get notified as soon as new content drops, and you can contact us directly if you have any questions, issues, concerns on Twitter at the Fantasy 4-Pack, at the Fantasy 4P_Ian, at Senpai Koala, at the Foon, and you can find Mike over at TrashTalk_media. That'll do it for us today. We'll see you guys tomorrow when we bring you some of our fresh waiver takes, as well as some trade targets, money picks for DraftKings, and a few other bits and bobs. Adios.